So I really liked the movie. It's interesting because I live in New York, so getting to see a movie that pretty much follows New York geography really well was interesting. Um, I will say I did make fun of her for taking the train from 23rd to 34th at one point. But what when you're
She
making
doesn't know what's going on.
I know, but she
Yeah,
took
like
that
I
train
don't
and I was
I
like, you
don't
can
think she
walk
would
that.
normally do that. Yeah.
But when you're making a movie that is so on the ground New York, what are some of the challenges that you came across in making Italian studies?
Well, this is the third movie I made that really we take to the streets of New York. This is the one that I think is the least geographically literal because she and we as the audience don't really know where we are. There are the other movies I would like map out like how long that would take. And for this it was like we're sort of unmoored from sense of place or time. Um uh I like it's like in some ways it's more of a question for my producers who are so great, so I don't really know the challenges that we're seeing. But I love shooting here because it is very open to that. It's actually pretty easy to get a permit. It's pretty easy and people for the most part don't care that you're shooting, especially a smaller thing, we shoot from across the street and stuff like that. And sometimes there'll be some interference from people or people will stop and look at the camera and things like that. Because for this movie, we weren't shutting down any streets. My previous movie, it was a mix. And so the wildness of the city can be a factor. We had some disruptive personalities, show up one night and have to get some of our producing team to sort of
The
go
mouth?
go off and go off and get drunk with a stranger so that they would stay away.
Great.
Um, and but for the most part, no, it's the city's really inviting and welcoming, I think. And we were working with a team of people who've had a lot of experience shooting here.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like you said, like we're following her journey. She doesn't really know what's going on. Um, and it's really interesting seeing how this movie unfolds. Because I know for me, I was worried about that dog the entire movie. But like, what
when I
dr-
pitched when I pitched the movie to one of the financiers, I get to the dog and she was like, "Stop right now. If the dog dies, I'm not in."
well, because in the beginning she was, "Were you there when I lost my dog?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"It better be just physically lost, and then you find it. Like if this dog dies because you walked away, I'm gonna be
Yeah, no,
furious."
no, no, we couldn't. It was something another one of my producers said very early on. Like there are going to be a segment of the audience that is just going to be like, "This dog better come back," right?
Oh yeah, I was like, "Is this gonna turn into John Wick?" And
Spoiler alert: the dog lives. I think we
I
can
was like,
say that.
"Is this gonna be like John Wick?" And all of a sudden, like the dog is dead, and no one knows who this woman is. Um, but what drew you into trying to tell this story in the first place? Because it is very interesting and cerebral when you're kind of watching it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Everybody's reaction to this movie is always interesting to me because people will be like, "Ah, it's so emotional and non-cerebral." Um, uh, what drew me to it was happenstance, which is Vanessa and I were friends for a while, and we were looking for something to do. She called me up and said that she had these sort of gaps in her schedule where she could be in New York. We ended up shooting some stuff in London as well, and she and so we talked about what kind of story do we want to tell that can be told this way, where we are shooting somewhat piecemeal, where she wanted to be thrown out into the streets, and the idea of and we had talked about the idea of being present. We had talked about the idea of identity. We knew that we had these teenagers that we loved and wanted to work with, and so from that sort of came this idea uh, to tell the story of somebody who has a dissociative episode, and to tell it all from their point of view. And so to embrace the idea that we were going to shoot some of it in winter and some of it in summer, and embrace the idea that this character doesn't know. what time it is, and it's sort of really become unmoored in space and time. It came from some conversations with Vanessa, and it came from some practicalities of how we were going to shoot it, and how much we all were really adamant that we wanted to make a movie that could only be made this way. And not a movie that, well, if we had our druthers, we would shoot this for 8 weeks straight, on a set, but we have to do it this way. We get to do it this way.
Yeah, and it's I have so many questions. But well, it's funny because you said, oh, people go back and forth between not cerebral but emotional. But like to me, it's so frightening thinking of just not knowing who you are, where you are all of a sudden. And it gets me so in my head of like, no, that's terrifying. But with this movie, what I found really interesting was as I watched it, I recognized that her costume was changing without her like going anywhere or doing anything. And so when you're approaching that, is that something that you had the input on, or was that just because you were playing with seasons and playing with where she is and everything?
Well, it was something we embraced. I mean, it's something we knew. We knew we were going to shoot in the summer, and we knew we were going to shoot in the winter. And then then becomes this conversation of, okay, well, we embrace that. We're not, we don't want to, the movie, Alina lies a lot, but the movie, we really didn't want to lie. And so we were just, so I would say to the kids, and I would say to Vanessa, however you show up that day, bring that. If you scored last night and you're excited, bring that. If you got dumped last night and you're sad, bring that. It's okay. Like, if it rains, it rains. Like, we were crafting a story and a universe that needed to embrace that in some ways, and I think is better for embracing that. So yeah, we knew when we were putting her in the summer outfit first, that there was going to be a winter outfit, and that it was going to mimic the summer outfit but be different, and that we were going to put the scenes, that she would turn, and literally her outfit changes. She goes into the motel in the winter outfit, she shows up at the desk, and the cuts, and she's in the summer outfit because she doesn't know. And so yeah, that was something that was discussed and planned.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because that was the scene that gave it away for me. Like I was just like, oh, she must have stolen some coat or whatever. And because the sweater is the same color, and it
Yeah,
didn't correlate until I saw that scene. I was like, oh, they're completely different costumes.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. We
you
we
mentioned, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 we know that how an audience, yeah, yes, yes.
But you mentioned the teenagers. It's really interesting because I love Maya Hawke's inclusion and the short story that she connects to. And I used to do UCB, so I used to see Fred all the
Oh
time
my
with his
God.
dad at UCB, and so it's very
Yeah.
funny to see him in these things now. And so with the teenagers, how did you work with them? You said bring whatever energy you want, but were all of those characters crafted like together, or were they kind of already established within the story? Like, how did you work with all these kids trying to make those own little stories work?
I had worked on a live show with Fred and
Mhm.
with some other people who are in the movie, including several of the teenagers. Annabelle Hoffman, who plays Lucinda the singer. Maya Hawke worked on that show with us, and Simon. And we and so I knew them, and so I knew how to put them in. And their roles changed a little bit, as we developed. And then we brought in a bunch of other people through a casting director, some of Fred's friends, some other people that we knew, and we worked with them for about 3 months, pretty regularly, where we would do rehearsals, which would be could mean a lot of different things, but we're often kind of just hanging out and talking, and sort of almost rehearsals for those interview segments that are in the movie. And through that, as we had the script, we knew the beats of the script, but through that experience, we would put different groups of kids together, and sort of see, and we were able to build our cast and build our characters around them and the stories that they were telling and the energy that they were bringing in.
And it's really interesting because I like how their reality is sort of different from hers in a lot of ways, like, and it's all kind of thrown together. And so how, when you're directing something like that, do you get those takes that you want out of them, because they are so similar but also very different when they're all put together in the end.
Um, it depends from working with Vanessa. Then is where it depends. Working with every actor is different, but
Mhm.
for how we did it, it really came from just working with and knowing those kids and being able to allot the time on set to both have scripted elements and to have them be able to sort of fall back into what our rehearsals were like, which were free flowing conversation. Um, and then from there being able to just having been working with them enough and having a trust that was built, I think, both ways between me and them and Vanessa and them, um, being able to on set get what we needed to get in terms of scripted stuff, play, and when things felt really good that we were finding in the play, uh going in and getting the coverage or getting the little beats that we needed to make sure that the scene kind of weaved together and that we weren't going to screw over our editors. And so yeah, I mean, it was prep. It was I think I think you always need to really prep. I think particularly you need to prep for things that are less scripted.
And I did have a question, because the beginning of this movie, I thought it was going to be very ominous, and I was scared because that first meeting, I was like, oh no, what happened? And then at the end, we see that they're talking and fine, and walking around. Spoilers, but like, it's
No, no,
like
no. Yeah.
they're telling that story. Was that intentional? Like, did you want the audience to kind of have that anticipation from
Yeah.
that first meeting?
Yeah. I think it is intentional. I think that, I mean, it is in our script and it is in our like lookbook and stuff like that about um that. And I don't think it's just that initial meeting. I think it's actually really the first 10-15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
She's lost and it's dangerous and she's unmoored and then how the movie is in a lot of ways how we connect to our environment, how we connect to the people in that environment. And so seeing how she's able to connect with Simon and the harrowing elements of when she disconnects with Simon and she is back on her own and things like that. It does go up and down, but really I think it ends up being the story of that connection in particular, and connecting with the space around you in general. So yeah, and it seems to be true. I don't know how intentional this is, but it's something that people have said about all of the features that I've directed, that they all the first one's called Give Me the Loot. Everyone's always
Mhm.
like, I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. I'm waiting for the guns to come out. Like, and it's just like you realize about 30 minutes in, oh, this is just going to be lovely. And Tramp sort of is the same way. It kind of starts as like someone getting a call from prison and there's a heist but it ends up being really a romance. And yeah, I think that I like warm stories. So yeah.
And I always like to end on this. What do you hope audiences take away from Italian studies when they get to see it?
Mm, that is the hardest question that I could be asked about this movie.
Yeah.
I think I can answer it about other movies. Uh, um, I, I hope that they have an experience, um, and that's it. I mean, and then whatever it is, I hope they have an experience. I hope that they're entertained, and what they take away from it can I don't want to define that. And I've taken away different things from it, different times I've seen it, and so I know that can sort of be a wishy-washy thing. I kind of hate when directors give that answer normally, but I think for this movie, which has a very specific story and is very structured and has, is not an improv riff. It still is something that I hope it leaves people feeling something. And the best reactions that we've gotten are from people who the a couple days later will get in touch with me and be like, I'm still thinking about that movie. Like if there's something about it as I walk around my environment, as I think about me as a teenager, as whatever it is. So yeah, I don't know.
That's
It's
perfect.
the best I
No,
can
it's
do.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to now go back and watch your other stuff because this,
Oh,
someone who lives in New York, made me
oh
very
yeah,
happy being like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah. They're both good New York movies, and they're both pretty. They're both short, like this one, and they're lighter a little bit.
well, I can't wait. Thank you so much. I can't wait for everyone to get to see this movie. I really liked it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.